They tell you that being wounded is part of a soldier's duty. They tell you that pain is a gift, a reminder that you still serve. They tell you that medical care is the Emperor's mercy made manifest. But none of that prepares you for the moment your body fails on the battlefield and you realize the truth. You don't belong to yourself anymore. You belong to the war, and the war decides whether you live or die. My name, before they took it, was Kellen Dravik, Line Infantry of the Vornal Wardens, a regiment deployed to the shattered world of Girion 9, a place where ash fell like snow and the soil burned beneath your boots. We fought in the ruins of manufactorums older than our recorded history, their engines still coughing soot long after their workers had turned to dust. The enemy was everywhere, hidden in the broken steel skeletons of collapsed towers. They struck with guerrilla precision, then vanished into the smog as if the planet itself had swallowed them. On the 12th day of fighting, I learned what happened to the wounded. It began with the explosion, an improvised charge buried beneath a sheet of twisted metal. The blast tore through my squad as we rounded a corner. Troopers screamed. Fire swallowed the air. When the dust cleared, I lay on my back staring at a sky the color of rusted blood. My left leg was gone below the knee. Shrapnel rattled inside my armor like loose bones. My rifle lay several meters away, half melted. The world around me dissolved into a blur of smoke and muffled shouts. I tried to crawl, but my fingers slipped on the ash-slick ground. Every movement sent waves of agony through my body. I tasted metal. I tasted fear. And worst of all, I tasted shame that I had fallen, that I had become weight instead of a weapon. Medici servitors arrived first, their mechanical limbs clicking like insect mandibles. Their lenses scanned me, cold and unfeeling. One jabbed a syringe into my neck without warning, flooding my veins with a numbing agent that turned the world gray. Another hissed as it clamped a tourniquet around the shredded stump of my leg. I remember its voice, a monotone whisper reciting surgical scriptures from a long-forgotten age. Not for comfort, for protocol. Then the troopers came, not comrades, not brothers, retrievers. Their armor was marked with black chevrons, the symbol of the Wounded Reclamation Corps. Their job wasn't to save us. It was to sort us. One trooper knelt beside me, tapping a data slate against my chest plate. His visor reflected my own broken form. I couldn't read his expression. Perhaps there wasn't one. Still alive, he muttered. For now. He pressed a seal onto my armor. A red tab, the color of salvageable. Those marked with black tabs were left behind. We were dragged, literally dragged, across the battlefield to a bunker that reeked of antiseptic and burnt flesh. The screams inside pierced even the numbing haze in my mind. Troopers moved through the corridors like shadows, carrying stretchers, amputating limbs, injecting coagulants, sealing wounds with searing thermal clamps. The air was thick with incense burned to mask the stench, but it only made everything feel more surreal, more ritualistic. They placed me on a rusted metal table under flickering lights. A Medici officer leaned over me, her face lined by exhaustion and stained with dried blood. She didn't speak to me, didn't ask my name, didn't offer comfort. She simply examined my wounds with the blank efficiency of someone who had seen too many bodies to care about one more. "You'll live," she finally said. "Whether you'll want to is another matter." She signaled to the servitors. That was when I realized the truth. The wounded weren't saved. They were processed. A trooper lying beside me begged to keep his arm. Another sobbed for water. A third prayed until his voice failed. I heard bones being cut. I heard skin sizzling beneath cauterizers. I heard a single phrase repeated by the Medici team over and over like a mantra carved into their souls. Preserve what can be used. Purge what cannot. I drifted in and out of consciousness as the servitors worked on my leg. Pain surged in waves. Memories blurred. The bunker lights faded. At one point, I felt a hand squeeze my shoulder, gentle and human. But when I looked up, the owner of that hand was already gone. Hours later, maybe days, they wheeled me into the lower wards. That was where the real lesson began. The wounded were everywhere. Rows upon rows of silent figures in makeshift cots. Missing limbs, missing eyes, missing hope. Some stared blankly at the ceiling. Others whispered prayers through cracked lips. A few, broken beyond repair, lay in sealed coffins waiting for transport to the purification pits, where their bodies would be converted into nutrient slurry for frontline troops. No one called this mercy. They called it efficiency. As I lay among them, surrounded by the dying and the forgotten, I understood the grim reality of my new existence. On the battlefield, a soldier was a weapon. In the reclamation wards, a soldier was a resource. And resources were meant to be spent. Pain returned before memory did. It came in slow waves at first, like distant thunder rolling across a burned horizon. Then it sharpened, needles under the skin, fire in the nerves, a crushing ache that pulsed in time with what was left of my heartbeat. I awoke strapped to a cot in the lower ward, surrounded by dim lumen strips and the low hum of ancient machinery struggling to keep itself alive. The air was thick with disinfectant, metal, and the unmistakable scent of blood so old that it had soaked into the walls. Rows of wounded soldiers lay around me, their faces pale, their bodies twisted by injuries that should have killed them. Some groaned softly, some whispered prayers that sounded more like apologies. Others lay perfectly still, breathing only because machines forced air into their lungs. No one spoke above a whisper. Pain demanded silence. A Medicae servitor glided past my cot, its mechanical limbs extending and retracting in an unsettling rhythm. It paused just long enough to scan the stump where my leg once was. A cold burst of antiseptic mist sprayed across the wound. I flinched, teeth clenching. The servitor did not acknowledge my reaction. It simply stamped a fresh sigil onto my chart and moved on. Red mark, recovery possible. Yellow mark, limited utility. Black mark, purge. I had a red, for now. Across the aisle, a trooper began screaming as a team of Medicae personnel sawed through the remnants of his shattered arm. The sound was raw, primal, and unending. Not the shout of a soldier, but the cry of a human spirit cracking under pressure. The Medicae didn't slow. They didn't reassure him. They worked with the cold precision of ritual. When they finished, they wrapped the wound in synth bandage and pushed him aside for the next patient. He received a yellow. He would live, but not usefully. A chaplain walked between the rows of wounded, mumbling scripture under his breath. His voice was hoarse, as though he had repeated the same verses for decades without rest. He paused beside each soldier long enough to press a cog-shaped blessing onto their foreheads. Some troopers reached for him, desperate for comfort. He didn't slow. His eyes were empty, his expression carved by exhaustion. Faith here was not hope. It was sedation. A medic approached my cot, one of the few humans not yet replaced by augmentics. Her face was partially obscured by a respirator mask, but the dark circles around her eyes said everything. She checked my pulse, adjusted a tube feeding pain suppressants into my bloodstream, and studied me carefully. "You're awake," she said flatly. "Yes," I managed, my throat dry as dust. "You're fortunate," she continued. "We almost wrote you off during triage." Fortunate. The word rang hollow. I gathered my courage. "How many survived the blast?" She didn't answer immediately. She placed a cold instrument against my chest, listening to my lungs. Then she said, "3 of you reached the ward. You're the only one still stable." What she didn't say, but what hung in the air like a heavy fog, was clear enough. Stable did not mean safe. Stable meant they hadn't decided whether I was worth the resources. She removed her mask briefly, revealing a face worn beyond its years. "Don't hope for rest," she said quietly. "In these wards there is no healing, only sorting." Then she moved on, leaving me with her words echoing inside my skull. Hours, or perhaps days, passed in a cycle of pain, sedation, and half-conscious nightmares. Whenever I awoke, I saw new bodies being dragged into the ward, some still breathing, some already dead. The living were placed in cots. The dead were tagged and stacked near the rear exit, ready for disposal. Troopers too damaged to serve became biomass, their remains fed into recyclers to fuel the front lines. War did not waste material. The Medicae staff moved with mechanical precision, each step rehearsed, each gesture practiced. They amputated what could not be saved. They sealed wounds with cauterizers that filled the air with the stench of burning flesh. They injected drugs that kept us alive not for comfort, but for assessment. I noticed something else. Every time a trooper cried for help, shouted for water, begged for death, the Medicae ignored them. But when someone stayed silent, enduring quietly, they received faster attention. Pain tolerance was another metric, another test, another way to determine who might still be useful. One night, if night even existed in this underhive bunker, I overheard 2 Medicae officers speaking near my cot. "Frontline losses are higher than projected," one said. "Command wants a new batch of fit bodies in 12 hours. "We don't have fit," the other replied. "We have broken. Then make them useful. Augmetics, stims, nerve chains, anything. Just don't send them nothing." Their footsteps faded. Make them useful. That was the doctrine of the reclamation wards. Not healing, not mercy, utility. A trooper beside me finally succumbed, his body stiffening beneath stained sheets. A servitor rolled over, identified the lack of vitals, and stamped a black sigil on his forehead. His cot was emptied within minutes. His belongings were swept into a bin. His body was gone before his last breath cooled. I stared at that empty cot for a long time. Then I realized something heavy, something I had felt but denied since the moment I awoke here. The wounded weren't supposed to recover. They were supposed to be repurposed, recycled, reassigned, or removed. Whatever happened next, whatever treatment, awaited those marked with red sigils. It wouldn't be healing. It would be transformation. And survival might cost the last pieces of who I was. I awoke to the sound of metal trays clattering against a steel floor, followed by the muffled groans of soldiers being moved from one station to another. The ward lights flickered above me, casting long, jittering shadows across the walls. Everything felt colder than before, as though the warmth had been drained from the room during the night, if it was night. Time in the reclamation ward was measured not by hours, but by how many new bodies were dragged in. A Medicae assistant, barely older than myself, her face lined with exhaustion, approached with a wheeled cart filled with surgical tools. "Red tags first," she muttered to no one in particular. "Command wants them processed before the next offensive." She reached my cot and scanned the seal on my chest plate. "Red, salvageable, useful." She nodded. "You're up soon." "Up for what? Surgery? Deconstruction? Repurposing?" I wanted to ask, but the words stuck in my throat. I was afraid that speaking would make it real. Across the aisle, a wounded trooper began to convulse. His spine arched violently, his jaw clenched, and his eyes rolled back into his skull. A servitor glided to his side and injected a sedative without hesitation. His body relaxed, his breathing slowed, but the moment he fell still, a human Medicae stepped in, checked his vitals, and sighed. She reached up and changed his tag from yellow to black. Non-responsive. Resources not worth allocation. 2 orderlies carried him away moments later. The speed of it terrified me. Here, death was just another administrative task. Before I could fully grasp the horror, a pair of armored retrievers arrived. Their boots clanged against the metal floor with the finality of executioners. One pointed at me with a gauntlet hand. "This one. Bring him." Cold dread wrapped around my spine. The Medicae assistant unstrapped me from the cot and helped me sit upright. My head spun. The stump of my missing leg throbbed with rhythmic pulses of hot pain. She looked at me briefly, her eyes softening for the first time since I arrived. "Stay calm," she whispered. "The more stable you are, the better your chances." Chances of what? I didn't ask. The retrievers hoisted me onto a grav slab and pushed it down a long corridor leading away from the main ward. The lights above buzzed and flickered, illuminating walls coated with antiseptic grime and worn propaganda posters urging soldiers to die with purpose. The deeper we went, the quieter everything became, until the only sounds were the hum of the grav slab and my own uneven breathing. We stopped before a sealed steel door marked with a symbol I didn't recognize. A skeletal hand holding a torch. One retriever keyed a code into the panel. The door unlocked with a mechanical groan. Inside was another chamber, colder, darker, far more clinical. Rows of surgical tables filled the room, each surrounded by arcane instruments of steel and glass. Servo skulls drifted above them, trailing incense smoke and chanting binary hymns. The air tingled with the scent of ozone, anesthetic, and ritual. A figure stood at the center workstation. She wore a white coat stained with old blood, her face partially masked by a respirator, her eyes sharp and analytical. Her hands were clasped behind her back with militaristic discipline. She looked like someone who had dissected more bodies than she had ever spoken to. She stepped forward. "I am Mugos Medicae Soraya Holst," she said. "Your fate, soldier, depends not on mercy, but on math." Her words sent a chill through me deeper than the cold air of the chamber. She circled me slowly, scanning the stump of my missing leg, the burns across my side, the shrapnel embedded near my ribs. "Your condition is borderline," she said, "but command requires replacements, and your nervous system appears intact enough to support augmentation." Augmentation. The word echoed in my skull. "You will not be healed," she continued. "You will be altered, rebuilt, converted into something the Imperium can still use." Images flashed through my mind. Servitors with expressionless visages, cyborg troopers with mechanical limbs clamped to raw muscle, soldiers who no longer looked entirely human. My pulse quickened. The Mugos noted it. "You fear this. Good. Fear means you still have a mind. Many lose that long before surgery begins." She gestured toward the surgical table behind her. "Lie down. The reclamation will begin shortly." Two servitors rolled forward, their skeletal steel hands extending with surgical precision. My body froze. Every instinct screamed to run, to fight, to do anything but submit to the cold machinery preparing to cut into me. But I couldn't run, couldn't fight, and submission was the only path that didn't end in a black sigil on my forehead. I allowed them to lift me onto the table. Restraints clamped around my arms and remaining leg, tightening until the pain became constant pressure. Servo skulls descended, illuminating my body with harsh white light. Mugos Holst leaned over me, her masked face inches from mine. "Remember this moment," she said softly. "This is the last time you will ever be whole." Something inside me broke. Not physically, emotionally. I felt a crack open in the foundation of who I thought I was. I gritted my teeth as the first needle descended, filled with a glowing blue agent that burned even before it touched my skin. My breath caught, my vision blurred, and then the world vanished in a flood of blinding white agony. The reclamation had begun. Pain returned before consciousness did. A deep, electric throb radiating from places in my body that no longer felt like mine. I tried to breathe, but my lungs seized as though remembering how to function took effort. The world around me seemed distant, wrapped in gauze and static. When my eyes finally opened, the ceiling above me flickered with dim lumen strips, each one buzzing with unstable power. I lay on a metal slab in a chamber colder than death itself. For a moment I couldn't move. Then I realized I wasn't supposed to. Restraints still held my arms and my remaining leg. My left stump, once raw and torn, was now sealed under a smooth industrial brace. The skin around it pulsed with faint blue light, dormant augmented nerves waiting to be connected to whatever new limb they planned to graft onto me. Tubes ran into my veins. Another line fed into my spine. Every part of me ached with unnatural pressure, as if invisible hands were still rearranging me from the inside. A voice drifted into the chamber. "You survived stage 1. Better than some." Mugos Medicae Soraya Holst emerged from the shadows like a specter carved from steel and exhaustion. The faint whir of her augmentic leg echoed on the metal floor. She approached with a slate in her hand, eyes scanning the readouts with rapid focus. "You endured the nerve grafts," she said. "The adrenal spines accepted the implants. Heart rhythm stabilized after intervention. You are functional." She paused. "For now." I tried to speak, but my voice cracked like old paper. "What did you do to me?" "Everything necessary," she replied without emotion. "We removed compromised tissue, installed reinforcement mesh along your ribs, laced your bloodstream with reaction stimulants, upgraded your pain filtration threshold. You are no longer simply wounded." She tilted her head slightly. "You are becoming an asset again. Asset. Not human. Not soldier. Asset." As she turned away to adjust a console, I tried to lift my right arm. It moved, but with a stiffness that felt alien. I glanced down. My hand was mine, but beneath the skin I saw faint metal tracery pulsing with cold light, like veins that no longer carried blood. A wave of nausea rolled over me. Holst looked back. "Your nerves will adapt, or they will reject. If they reject, you will join the biomass vats." She said it casually, as though discussing weather patterns. "Regardless, you will not remain in this room long." I clenched my jaw. "What happens next?" She stepped closer, her respirator mask reflecting my broken shape in warped glass. "Stage 2. Cognitive assessment." She tapped a panel and the restraints released with a sharp hiss. Pain surged through my limbs, but I didn't fall apart. Augmentics held me together even as my mind reeled. Holst guided me off the slab, her grip cold and firm. The floor below felt uneven beneath my bare mechanical foot. No, not foot. Not yet. The stump brace ended in exposed ports waiting for a limb that had not been attached. My balance wavered. A servitor caught my arm, stabilizing me with a strength that bordered on violent. Holst observed with clinical curiosity. "You still expect your body to respond like flesh," she said. "That expectation will vanish shortly." She led me down a long corridor lined with observation windows. Behind each pane, I saw others like me. Soldiers stripped down to bone and metal, undergoing their own transformations. One screamed as a mechanical limb fused to his nervous system. Another lay unconscious while a muggos cut into his spine, replacing vertebrae with metallic mockeries. A third stared blankly at a wall, his eyes replaced with glowing implants. "Are they going to fight again?" I whispered. "If they survive," Holst said. "If their minds hold. If their implants stabilize. If command deems them still loyal." She paused. "Many fail one of these requirements. Few pass all. And those who fail? Disposed." A single word with the weight of a graveyard. We reached the cognitive chamber. A circular room filled with humming machinery that cast eerie blue light on the floor. A single chair sat in the center, surrounded by cables coiled like serpents. Holst gestured. "Sit." I obeyed. Servo skulls drifted around me, lowering neural spikes toward my temples. I felt the first needle pierce skin, sliding through flesh into nerve pathways. My breath caught. The second spike entered. Then the third. My vision blurred white, then black, then exploded into fractal shapes that twisted like shattered memories. Holst's voice echoed through the machinery. "Your mind must be tested. We need to know if you can still obey under pain, under hallucination, under fear, under loss." The machine flared. Images flooded my senses. I saw my squad dying again, shrapnel tearing through familiar faces. I saw the battlefield where I lay bleeding, unable to move. I saw Rin, my sergeant, my anchor, telling me to hold the line. I saw him fall. I saw the explosion again. I felt the heat. I heard my own screams. Then the machine shifted. I saw myself, armored, faceless, limbs replaced with steel, standing among a new formation of half-human soldiers. I marched in perfect synchronization. No fear, no hesitation, no identity. A voice, my own voice, whispered, "You are what remains." Then everything snapped. I gasped, the world jolting back into focus. Blood trickled from my nose. Holst watched me with detached approval. "You did not break," she said. "Good. Many do." My voice trembled. "I saw things." "You saw potential outcomes," she replied. "Now you will learn the final truth." Servitors moved toward me with a new limb, my new leg, a steel construct humming with dormant power. It gleamed under the blue light like a blade waiting to be used. Holst spoke quietly, almost reverently. "You asked what happens to the wounded." She leaned in close. "This is what happens." Her eyes glimmered behind her respirator. "The wounded are remade." The new limb attached with a sound I will never forget. A grinding metallic click followed by a deep, vibrating hum as the augmetic woke for the first time. The servitors supported me from both sides as cables connected into ports along my thigh, sinking into bone with cold mechanical certainty. I felt the weight of the metal legs settle into place. Heavy, unnatural, an intruder grafted onto my flesh. Then came the spark, an electrical surge that tore through my nerves like lightning. I screamed. It wasn't a cry of pain. It was a raw, instinctive convulsion, my body rejecting what logic told it should now be mine. The agony was so deep it felt spiritual, a tearing of self that no mind was meant to endure. My hands clawed at the table until my nails split. My vision flickered white and black, flickering between reality and hallucination. Holst did not flinch. She simply watched, recording readings on her slate. "Let the system sink," she said calmly. "If your mind shatters, we'll know shortly." Her words barely registered through the storm raging inside me. The limb pulsed again, this time more controlled. The servitors adjusted tension points, tightening metallic tendons. My breathing steadied. Slowly, very slowly, the limb's tremors matched the rhythm of my heartbeat. My nerves stopped screaming and instead burned with a strange warmth. Holst nodded once. Functional integration achieved. "Stand." I looked at her, horrified. "I can't." "You can," she said. "Or you die here." The servitors released me. I fell hard. My metal leg hit the floor with a solid clang that echoed through the chamber. I struggled to rise, hands slipping on the slick tiles. Pain stabbed through my stump where metal fused to flesh. My human leg trembled beneath the weight of its new counterpart. Holst's voice cut through the humiliation. Again. I tried to stand. Fell again. Harder. Again. On the third attempt, I made it halfway upright before collapsing. My palms split open on impact. I tasted blood. Holst gave the slightest tilt of her head. "Adequate. Continue." For hours, or what felt like hours, I tried and failed until the motions began to shape themselves into something like control. Each attempt carved a new scar into my pride, but the limb responded faster, its mechanical precision blending with my frantic desperation. Eventually, I stood fully upright, chest heaving, sweat dripping down my temples. Holst approached, examining my posture as if inspecting a weapon rack. "Acceptable. We proceed." Proceed to what? I learned quickly. The next chamber wasn't medical. It was military. Rows of troopers, augmented like me, stood at attention. Some had metal arms, others reinforced spines, some replaced jaws or eyes glowing faintly blue. Their faces were masks devoid of expression, shaped by pain and compliance. The stench of blood and oil filled the air. Instructors barked orders, forcing the wounded turned augmented to march, lift weights, practice firing drills, and demonstrate obedience. Holst gestured to an instructor. "This one is ready for conditioning." The instructor's eyes locked onto me, judging, measuring. He was not a medic. He was a breaker. "Walk," he ordered. I stepped forward. My metal leg struck the ground with unnatural force, making my balance waver. He smacked the back of my head with a baton. Again. I straightened, walked, fell, rose, walked again. Run. Pain shot through my hips as the augmetic struggled to harmonize with my human muscles. I stumbled, caught myself, forced my body to keep moving. The metal foot slammed into the floor with each impact, a harsh metallic drumbeat echoing down the corridor. "Stop." I froze instantly. "Good," he said. "Pain has not broken you yet. We'll see how long that lasts." He pointed to a firing range. "Shooting drills. Now." I took a rifle, its weight familiar yet distant, like touching a memory through glass. My hands shook, my breath caught, but the metal limb anchored me, providing a stability I didn't expect. My first shot missed. My second grazed the target. By the 10th, I hit center mass. Behind me, 2 augmented troopers argued. One's voice rose in desperation. "I'm not ready. My arm isn't sinking. Please?" A handler struck him across the face, knocking him to the ground. "Get up," the handler said. The trooper tried. His mechanical arm spasmed violently. Sparks flew. He screamed. Holst walked over calmly, without urgency, as though observing a piece of machinery malfunction. She knelt, examined the trooper's twitching limb, and sighed quietly. "Failure of integration," she said. The trooper's eyes widened. "No, wait. Give me time, please." Holst signaled to the retrievers. 2 armored figures seized him. His screams filled the room, echoing off the metal walls as he was dragged toward the disposal hatch. The vent shaft opened. A blast of heat surged into the chamber, enough to sear the hairs on my arms. The trooper's voice rose into a tortured wail. Then silence. The shaft closed. Holst turned back to me as though nothing had occurred. "Continue your drills." My hands trembled so violently the rifle nearly slipped from my grip. I forced myself to keep going. Not because I wanted to, but because stopping meant following the same path as the man who had just been consumed by fire. Hours passed, maybe longer. My mind blurred. My body rebelled. My nerves felt raw, scraped by invisible knives. But I endured barely. At the end of the session, the instructor approached me. "You'll live," he said. His tone was not praise. It was a threat wrapped in indifference. Holst added, "Be grateful. Most never reach this stage." She gestured toward the exit. "There is one final step. One final step." The words felt heavy. I followed her down another corridor darker than the last. The air grew colder, the lights dimmer, the walls closer, and then I heard it. The sound of dozens of voices chanting in low, broken harmony. Holst stopped before a massive steel door adorned with ritual markings burned into its surface. "This," she said softly, "is where the wounded truly return." My breath froze. "Enter," she commanded. The door groaned open, and I stepped inside, into a place where the last remnants of humanity were stripped away. The door shut behind me with a metallic thud that echoed like the ceiling of a tomb. The chamber beyond was vast, an underground cathedral carved from steel and shadow. Blue lumen strips cast long, skeletal rays across the floor, illuminating rows of wounded soldiers who had been remade, augmented bodies glistening with chrome and dried blood, their flesh stitched to metal with brutal precision. Incense burned from mechanized sensors, mixing with the sterile scent of medici chemicals to create an atmosphere caught between ritual and slaughterhouse. The chanting grew louder. It wasn't scripture. It wasn't prayer. It was programming. Rhythmic, measured, repetitive. Voices, human and artificial, merging into a single echoing command that looped endlessly through the chamber. "You are the blade. You are the shield. You are the remnant. You are the machine." My stomach twisted. My new leg felt suddenly heavier, its weight pulling at my mind as much as my flesh. Rows of augmented troopers stood in tight formation in the center of the hall. Their bodies were mismatched, some with metal arms ending in reinforced plating, others with mechanical rib cages visible beneath torn skin. Eyes glowed in a dozen unnatural shades. Their breathing was shallow, synchronized, as though commanded by the same unseen conductor. Mugos Holst stepped beside me. "This is the reclamation, right?" she said softly, not out of kindness but formality. "This is where we strip away what you still cling to." "What does that mean?" My voice sounded small, swallowed by the chamber's vast emptiness. Holst did not hesitate. "Your memories, your doubts, your hesitation." Her gaze was unblinking behind her respirator. "You asked what happens to the wounded. This is the final answer." One of the augmented troopers broke formation, stepping toward us. His torso was wrapped in steel bands. One arm ended in a mechanical claw that clicked softly with each step. What remained of his face bore no emotion. Half bone, half mask, eyes replaced with cold glowing implants. Holst gestured toward him. "This one was Corporal Jast. shot through the spine on his 4th deployment. Now look at him. Jast's gaze met mine. For a moment, just a fragment of a second, I thought I saw recognition. A flicker of a man he once was. Then it vanished. Holst tapped her slate. Obedience confirmed. Jast returned to formation with machine-like precision. A cold dread spread through my chest. Why show me this? I whispered. Holst turned, her voice calm, clinical. Because you need to understand what you are about to become. Before I could respond, handlers entered the room, dragging in more wounded troopers. Some missing limbs, others sedated. A few screaming as their augmentics spasmed violently. They were thrown into containment chairs arranged in a circle around the formation. Electrodes were strapped to their skulls. Restraints clamped down. A low hum filled the chamber as machines powered up. Holst pointed toward an empty chair. For you. I froze. I'm not ready, I said. No one is ready, she answered. Sit. 2 handlers moved toward me. My metal leg trembled. No, not trembled. It reacted, as if it anticipated the command before I did. I stumbled backward, chest heaving, mind racing. Pain flared along my spine where the grafts had been made. For a heartbeat, I considered running. Where? Out into the battlefield? Back to the ward? Into the arms of a system that saw me only as material? Holst's voice cut through the fear. You survived the blast. You survived triage. You survived reclamation. You survived augmentation. You survived conditioning. She stepped closer, lowering her voice until it was barely above a whisper. Now survive this. The handlers seized me. I fought. Instinct, desperation, terror flowing in equal measure. But the new leg betrayed me, locking into compliance with a sharp jolt that nearly sent me collapsing. They forced me into the chair. Restraints snapped across my limbs, metal plates clamping down like the jaws of a predator. Cold electrodes pressed against my temples. Holst raised her slate. Begin neurological reformatting. A surge of energy ripped through me, blinding, scorching, tearing through every nerve and memory. My vision shattered into fragments. I saw faces. My parents, my squad, my sergeant, my friends, breaking apart like glass. I tried to hold on to them. I tried to scream their names. The machine drowned my voice. Fragments of memory dissolved. Birthdays, jokes shared in trenches. The feel of my rifle before augmentation. The sound of Rin's laugh, his last words. You must live. Don't let this break you. But I was breaking. The machine burrowed deeper, rewriting pathways, numbing pain centers, hardening loyalties, dulling the edges of thought. My heartbeat synced with the mechanical rhythm of the chant. You are the blade. You are the shield. You are the remnant. You are the machine. I felt something slip inside me. Something human. Something small. Something I tried desperately to hold on to. Then a spark. A glitch. A memory resurfaced. Not broken. Not fading. Not rewritten. Rin's voice. Clear. Steady. Defiant. Surviving isn't living. Remember that. My eyes snapped open. The machine faltered for a heartbeat. Just long enough for me to keep something, some sliver of self, hidden deep inside the fractures of my mind. Holst watched the readouts, frowning faintly. He resists partial overwrite, she said, but not enough to be discarded. She lowered her slate. Integration complete. The restraints released. I staggered forward into the formation of augmented soldiers. My movements felt smoother, colder, sharpened by metal and medicine. But deep beneath the programming, beneath the implants, beneath the reconstructed nerves, something else burned. A memory, a voice, a refusal to vanish completely. Holst raised her hand. Stand to command order. Every augmented soldier snapped to attention. So did I. Prepare for redeployment, she said. The wounded have returned. The chamber shook with the sound of synchronized footsteps as we marched toward the exit. A line of broken bodies remade into weapons. And inside me, beneath the layers of steel and obedience, a fragment of myself whispered back, faint but unbroken, I am still here,